This is the second part in the 4-part series where you learn to solve the Rubik's Cube blindfolded. In part 1, you learnt the lettering scheme, as well as how to trace through edges and corners. If you haven't watched part 1 yet, then go back and watch that, and then move on to this tutorial. In this tutorial, we will learn cycle breaking in edges, cycle breaking in corners, and pairing and wording. So by the end of the video, you'll be able to turn any scramble into a story that you can remember. So let's get going. Just like with tracing, the concept is the exact same for edges and corners, but I'll first explain it using edges as an example. To show you what cycle breaking is, I'm just going to get you to go ahead and do this edges only scramble to your cube. And we are going to do a trace through the edges like I explained in the last step. Right, so we'll get the green on the front and the yellow on the top. And again, starting at our buffer, we'll look that it's yellow on the top and red on the side. So we'll go down yellow and then red. So right here, which is U, because U is the first letter on the bottom face, like we learned back in step 1. And so U goes around to V. So we'll note down the letter V. And then that goes to orange and green. So that goes to the orange, green, so F. So then we have VF, and then that goes to back down here because it's yellow and blue, and so yellow and blue, so W. And then that, because it's green and white, goes up to here because green and white, so that's I. And then this goes to orange and yellow, and so that's going to be on the orange and yellow, so here, and that's E, F, G, so we'll note down G. And that's blue and red, and so that goes back to blue and red, so right here, and that's Q, R, S, T, so we'll note down T. And then that goes yellow, green, so yellow right here and green, so right here, which is U. And then that goes green and red, so green and red, so right here, which is J. And then that is white and red, so that's our buffer piece, so we don't need to memo that. So since we hit the piece that belongs at our buffer, this one here, that should be the end of our tracing, right? Well, it isn't. You might notice that after tracing around until we reached our buffer piece, these 3 unsolved pieces over here never got reached. And so this would actually mean that if we went through with just this being the tracing, then these 3 pieces would stay unsolved, meaning we wouldn't successfully solve the cube blindfolded. And we don't want that, so we have to do something called a cycle break. You see, all these pieces that we trace through actually form a cycle that starts at our buffer and goes around the cube until we eventually get back to our buffer. That's how all cycles work. It starts and ends at the same point. That's what a cycle is. And so these 3 pieces back here never got reached. They also form a cycle by themselves. And so in order to trace this cycle, we have to do something called cycle breaking into it. And how we do this is after finishing our first cycle by reaching the buffer, we just trace to one of the stickers involved in the second cycle and take note of the letter we go to as if we were just tracing to there. So for this example, I'll trace to this piece, which is A, B, C, D. So I'll note down the letter D. And then just like with other tracing, we look at what piece is there, and it's the blue and orange, which goes back here on the blue and orange, so right here. And so that's Q, R, so I'll note down R. And then this goes to the white and blue, and that goes to right here, which is A. And then this, it goes white and orange, so it goes back to here, which is A, B, C, D. And remember how for the first cycle we had that started at a buffer and ended back at our buffer, we didn't memorize the letter for our buffer at the end. But for any cycles beyond that first cycle, so like in this second cycle, we do memorize the letter at the end of the cycle. So we do memorize the D. So the tracing for that cycle would look like cycle breaking to D, so we have D, and then that goes to R, and then that goes to A, and then that goes back to D. So our complete tracing with the cycle break for this scramble would look like, starting at our buffer, we go to V, F, W, I, G, T, U, J, and then cycle break, and D, R, A, and D. Awesome. In just a moment, I'll get to a couple more full examples, but first let me just explain a couple little things that are quite important. So firstly, there can be pieces that are already solved, and we don't have to trace to them at all, they're just freebies. Secondly, there can be more than just 1 or 2 cycles, so keep tracing and cycle breaking until you've traced through every unsolved piece of the cube. I'll go through some examples soon that have more than just 1 or 2 cycles. And lastly, sometimes you may have edges in place but flipped around, and you just treat this as if it's its own cycle. So just like another cycle, you cycle break into it by tracing to one of the pieces, so let's say here, which would be A, B, C, and then you look at where that sticker goes. So since it's green and white, it would go to here because green and white. And so then you note down that letter, which is I. And since on that second letter, you go to the same piece that your cycle broke to, your cycle ends there. So in this instance, to solve the flipped edge here, it would just be C and then I. Or you could instead have chosen to break to I, which would have made it I, and then because it's white and green, C. So it could have been I, C, or CI, depending on where you chose to cycle break to. So a piece that's flipped in place will give you 2 letters if you cycle break into it. If you're feeling a little bit lost, don't worry. The concept of cycles and cycle breaking can be a little bit difficult to understand at first, but I'm going to cover a couple of examples now to help you get more familiar with it. So the first example is this scramble, so just go ahead and do it to your cube. Alrighty. So to start off our tracing, we start off at the buffer sticker right here, and that's orange and white. So it goes here at orange and white, and that is the letter E. And then that has red and blue, and so we'll go over to red and then blue. So right here, which is MN, and then that has orange and green, and so that goes to right here, which because orange and green, which is EF. So we note down the letter F. And then this has yellow and green, so that goes to, on the bottom here, yellow and green. So right here, which is U. So we note down the letter U. And then this has orange and then yellow, so we go to orange and then yellow. So right here, which is EFG. So we'll note down the letter G. And then that has yellow and then red, so that goes to yellow and then red. So right here, which is V, because UV. And then this has blue and white, so it goes to back here, because blue and white, so Q. And then this has green and white, so green, white goes to here, so I. So right now we have our buffer goes to E, and then N, and then F, and then U, and then G, and then V, and then Q, and then I. Awesome. And then we have yellow on the front and blue here, so yellow and blue, which is yellow on the bottom and blue back here. So we have U, V, W. So we add W onto our string of letters. And then we have white and red, which goes up to, oh, that's our buffer again. And so since that was our first cycle, then we don't memorize the letter for that last piece, which is our buffer. So we won't memorize the letter B, even though that's where it goes. And you might notice that there are 2 pieces on the cube that we haven't visited yet, that we didn't trace through. And those pieces are right here and right here. And so if we just went through with what we've already traced, just that being the tracing, then the cube wouldn't be solved if we try and use that as the memorization. So we have to do a cycle break to one of these unsolved pieces. So I'm going to choose just here, just because it's in the front, nice and easy. And that, so trace to here, which is I, J. So I'll note down the letter J. And then that goes blue and orange. So I look back here, blue and then orange. So right here, which is QR. So I'll note down the letter R. And this goes green and then red. So I'll go on the front here, green and red, and that's here, which is where we cycle broke to. But since it was the second cycle, then we do memorize the letter that the cycle ends at. So I and J. So we'll have another J. So in the end then, our tracing, it starts at the buffer and goes E, and then N, and that goes to F, then U, then that goes to G, that goes to V, that goes to Q, that goes to I, that goes to W, and then since that's our buffer, we cycle broke to J, and then to R, and then back to J. So even if it's just swapping two pieces, that still counts as a new cycle. Alright, now since cycle breaking can be a little bit of a confusing concept, I'm going to do another example so that we can really get a good understanding of cycle breaking. Alright, so this is the scramble that we have, and we start at our buffer and we look at where that needs to go. It's red and, oh no, it's already in its spot, but that's okay because it's just as if we reached our buffer, so we need to cycle break to another place. So I'm just going to pick A, just because it's easy, it's just A, and so our cycle broke to A, and then we look at where that needs to go, so green and red, so green and red is I, J. And then we look at where this needs to go, and since it's blue and then yellow, we go, it's blue and then it's yellow, so right here, which is Q, R, S. So we have S, and so we note that letter down. And then this needs to go to white and then blue, and so white and then blue. So right here, and that is the letter A, because it was the white, that was the one. So A. And since we cycle broke to A already as our second cycle, because before we even started tracing, the first cycle was already ended with this, so we had to break into our second cycle. But now we've reached the end of that second cycle, and so we note down the letter, which is A, and then we need to cycle break to a new place. So I'm going to pick right here, which is A, B, C, D, because we haven't solved that piece yet. So far our tracing looks like cycle break to A, and then J, and then S, and then A, and then D. And then we look at where that needs to go, which is blue and red. So that goes to blue and red. So right here, which is Q, R, S, T. And then we look at where that needs to go, which is orange and blue. So over here, because orange and blue, so E, F, G, H. So we write down the letter H. And that has orange and green. So that needs to go to orange and green. So right here, which is E, F. So we note down the letter F. And then this needs to go to the yellow and orange, which is on the bottom here, yellow and then orange. So right here, which is U, V, W, X. So we note down the letter X. And then where that needs to go, because it's red and yellow, we go red and yellow. So right here, which is M and O. So we note down the letter O. And then this has green and white. So that needs to go green and white. So right here, which is the letter I. And then this needs to go to white and then orange. So right here, which is A, B, C, D. And this ends our third cycle. But since it's not our first cycle, we do memorize the letter for that. So we'll note down the letter D. But then there's actually one piece that we didn't reach in all of that tracing, and that's this piece right here that's flipped in place. And so we're going to cycle break into one of the sides of this piece, and so I'm going to choose I, J, K. So I'll note down the letter K, and then since it's the yellow and green, it needs to go to yellow then green. So right here, which is U. And so we'll note down the letter U. And so then since on our second letter, we went back to the piece that we cycle broke to, then we just stop there. So we add on the K and then U. So altogether, our tracing for this rather complicated scramble would be initially cycle breaking to here. So A, and then J, and then that goes to here, S, which goes back to A, which ends the second cycle. And then we cycle break to here, which is D, and then that goes to here, which is T, and then that goes to here, which is H, which goes to here, which is F, which goes to here, which is X, which goes to here, which is O, and then I, and then ending our third cycle, we have D. And then we cycle break into K, and then end the cycle at U. So quite a complicated scramble, but we got through it by just following the things that I taught you. Alrighty, so now that we've gone through the examples of cycle breaking in edges, it is now time for you to do some practice. I will put 3 scrambles one at a time on screen and in the description with increasing difficulty that you can practice tracing edges with cycle breaks. Just like before, write down the letters as you go and unpause the video once you are done to see how you went. Now note that depending on where you chose to cycle break to, the letters that you wrote down could be different to mine, so feel free to leave the letters that you wrote down and the scramble in the comments, and I'll check if it is correct and get back to you as soon as possible. And with that, good luck for the practices. Alright, so now that you've learnt how to cycle break in edges, it's time to apply that same concept to corners. It all works essentially the same. You hit your buffer, you start a new cycle by going to an unsolved piece. The only slight difference is when a corner is twisted and you cycle break into it, you have to be careful to go to the right side of the corner. So for this twisted corner, we could choose to cycle break to here, which is MNOP, and we have to be careful to remember that this is the yellow, so it goes to here, which is UV, not to here because it's the yellow. So we'd have PV. And since cycle breaking for corners is pretty much the same concept as edges, I reckon that we can just go straight into an example. So do this scramble to your cube. Awesome. So we'll get the white to the top and the green to the front. And we'll start tracing from our buffer, which is back here. And the first place that it needs to go is the orange, the blue and yellow. So we go orange, blue and yellow, and so that is E, F, G, H. So we'll note down the letter H, and that goes to the white of the red and blue. So up on white and red and blue, so that's A, B. And then we have the white of the red and green, so white of the red and green, and so that would be A, B, C. So far we have our buffer goes to H, which goes to B, which goes to C. And then this is the orange, blue, and white. And so that goes back here at our buffer. And since it's our first cycle, we don't memorize our buffer sticker. So we'll actually never be memorizing any of these 3 letters for corners. And so we'll instead cycle break to one of the unsolved pieces on the cube. So we might cycle break to here, which would be A, B, C, D. So we'll note down the letter D, and that goes to the orange and yellow and green. So that goes here and yellow and green. So right here. So E, F, G. So I'll note down the letter G, and that is white of the green and orange. And so that goes up to here, white of the green and orange. And so that again is A, B, C, D. So then we have another D. And since that was our second cycle, we do note down the letter for the end of our cycle. But there's one piece that we haven't been to yet, and that is this piece back here, which is the corner that's twisted. So we have to cycle break into it. And so let's say we cycle break to here, which is M, N, O. So we'll write down the letter O. And then this is the yellow side. And so that needs to go to here, which is U, V, W. So we'll note down the W. And so since W is on the same piece that we cycle broke to, that's the end of that cycle. And so our tracing for corners ends up looking like our buffer goes to H, and then B, and then C, and then since that's our buffer, we cycle break to D, which goes to G, and then that goes back to D, which ends that cycle, and and then we cycle break down to here with O, and that goes to W, and that ends our cycle. And now that we've applied the concept of cycle breaking to corners as well, let's trace through edges and corners of a completely scrambled cube using cycle breaking. This will be the scramble we are using, so just go ahead and do that to your cube. Awesome. So once we get the white to the top and the green to the front, we're first going to be tracing through the corners. So we'll look back here at our corner buffer and oh no, it's already solved in place. But that's okay, because we just need to treat that as if our first cycle has already ended, and then we're going to cycle break to somewhere that we haven't solved yet. So I will cycle break, I'll trace to here, which is a B, and then so I'll look at where that needs to go, and it's green of the white and red. So that is right here, because green, the white and red. So that's I, J. So I'll note down the letter J. And then this is orange and the yellow and blue. And that goes to orange, yellow, blue. So right here, which is E, F, G, H. And then that is the white and the orange and green. So that goes to right here, because white, orange, and green. So that's A, B, C, D. And then this is the yellow and blue and red. And so that goes down to the bottom with yellow and back here because blue and red. So U, V, W. So I'll note down the letter W. And then this is blue and white and red. So we'll go back to blue and then white and red. So just here, which is Q. And since this is the piece that we cycle broke to, and this is our second cycle, then we do memorize that letter, so Q, and then we look around and we'll notice that this corner is twisted in place, and so in order to solve that, we have to cycle break into it. So I'm going to choose to cycle break to here, which is I, J, K, and so we'll note down the letter K, and then this is the yellow, and so it will go to the bottom here, yellow, which is U, V. So we have K and then V, and that ends the cycle there. So our corner tracing ends up looking like, since our buffer is solved, we cycle break straight to B, and then J, and then H, and then D, and then W, and then Q, which ends the second cycle, and then we cycle break to K, which goes to V. So now we can go on to the tracing of the edges, and our buffer is right here, and so we'll look at what's here to start off with, which is orange and white. So we'll go orange and white, so right here, which is E. And then this is orange and green, which goes to orange, green, right here, which is E, F. And then this is the white and the red, which, it's our buffer, which means that we don't memorize that letter because it was our first cycle, but we're going to cycle break. So we're going to trace to maybe this piece here because we haven't traced to that piece yet. So after going E, F, then we cycle break to here, which is A, and then that is orange and yellow. So we go orange, yellow, so that is G, and then that is the yellow and green, and so that goes yellow, then green, so here, which we know is U, because the first letter on the bottom face is U, just like we learnt back in step 1. And then that is the green and red, so in between green and red we have here, which is I, J. And then here we have the red and the yellow, so red, yellow, so right here, which is M, N, O. And then where does the piece that's there need to go? Well, it's blue and then orange, so back here we have blue and orange, so right here, which is Q, R. And then this is yellow and blue, so it needs to go to somewhere on the yellow, and blue's right here, so right here, which is U, V, W. So we note down the letter W and then look at where that needs to go, which is blue and then white, and that goes to back here, which is blue and then white. So right here is Q. And since that is the piece that we cycle broke to, and it's our second cycle, we do memorize the letter and we end our cycle there. So we add on Q. And so now we're going to look around. Are there any pieces that we haven't traced to yet? Well, there's this edge back here that's in place but flipped around. And so we need a cycle break into it. So maybe we can go to M, N, and so we can memorize the N. And then since that's the blue of the blue red, then that goes to here, which is QRST. So we'll remember NT. So our tracing for edges on this scramble starts at our buffer and goes E, then F. And then since that's our buffer, we don't memorize it because it was the first cycle. And we go to A, which goes to G, which goes to U, which goes to J, which goes to O, which goes to R, which goes to W, which goes to Q, and then we cycle break into N, and then T. And that's our tracing for edges, and we also trace the corners. Awesome. So now that we've gone through that example of tracing both edges and corners with cycle breaks, it's time for you to try tracing through both the edges and corners of a cube. You've learnt the lettering scheme, tracing for both edges and corners, and cycle breaking for both edges and corners, so you have everything you need to take on these practices, writing down the letters as you trace and cycle break through them. When you are finished, unpause the video or look down in the description for a possible solution. Because there is cycle breaking involved, and you could have chosen to cycle break to a different place than me, your letters could be slightly different. So if you want to know whether your solution would be a correct one, then just like before, feel free to put the scramble and your letters for the solution down in the comments, and I'll try to get back to you as soon as I can. But good luck! Alright, good job. Now it's time to move on to step number 6. So it's pretty cool that now you can turn a totally scrambled cube into a string of letters. But in order to solve the Rubik's Cube blindfolded, you are going to have to remember this string of letters. And what blindfolded solvers do is that when they are tracing, they group the letters into pairs. As they get a pair of letters, they turn that pair of letters into a memorable word that they then combine as they go into a story. And this makes it much more memorable. So if you have, say, for example, BT, that could be a bat, because bat has the letters B and T in it. However, it isn't a strict rule that the word has to have the 2 letters in it. It is just a word that you can associate with those 2 letters. So for some of the tougher ones with weirder letters like Q or V, you might like to be creative. For IV, I learnt from somebody named Jack Kai that you can use a slingshot. See if you can guess why I use this. Well, it is because if you stack like the V on top of an I, then it makes kind of like a slingshot. So if I had like BTIV, I could imagine in my head a bat holding a slingshot, or a bat getting shot out of a slingshot, or something like that. Okay, now I'll do a quick little example story. So let's say the string of letters we get for corners is MPDBHOC. If we break that into pairs, then we get MP, DB, HO, and then C on its own. And what we can do to make it easy to associate this single letter at the end with a word is to double it up. So we'd have CC. And it's important to remember each solve if there is a single letter left at the end, meaning an odd number of letters. And this is because of something called parity that will require you to put a special algorithm in between solving your edges and your corners. But we'll get to that later. So this string of letters could be turned into the mop for MP, was dabbing for DB, at Santa for HO. And I actually use Santa for HO because he goes ho ho ho. And so that's just something I do, and you can too if you want. So far we have a mop that was dabbing at Santa, and then we have CC. And for that you could maybe use corn chips. So it could be the mop was dabbing at Santa who was eating corn chips. Now that's much more memorable than just MPDBHOC. And you can do the exact same thing for any bunch of letters, for the corners and the edges. And this type of memorization is used by many memory athletes too. It's pretty surprising how easy it makes things to remember. So now I'll give you 3 lots of letters for you to have a go at pairing up, turning into words, and memorizing as a story. There are no right or wrong answers, as long as it helps you remember the letters. Alright, Well, now that we know the lettering scheme, how to trace through both edges and corners, how to cycle break in both edges and corners, and now know how to turn that string of letters that we get into a more memorable story, I'm going to do an example combining it all together, and then you can have a crack at some practices of everything you've learned so far. So this is the scramble for the example. Go ahead and do it to your cube. Awesome. So we're going to start off by getting the white center on the top and the green center on the front. And we're going to start off by first tracing the corners. So we look back at our corner buffer, which, it's already solved in place. And so that immediately ends the first cycle, and we're going to have to cycle break. And I'm going to choose to cycle break to here, which is a B. So we note down the letter B in our heads. And then that goes to the white and green and orange. So on the white and green and orange. So right here, which is A, B, C, D. So far we have B, D. And so I'm gonna use the word bed to remember that. And then this is the red of the blue and yellow. So that goes down here, red of blue and yellow. So right here is M, N, O. So we have an O. And then this goes to yellow, green, orange. So on the bottom here, yellow, green, orange. All right, so right here, and that's U. So we have OU. And there's a type of wood that's called like oud wood or oud wood or something. That's like OUD. So for OU, I use wood. And so I had a BD bed and then OU wood. So maybe I'll do the bed was made of wood. And then the piece that's here is orange and yellow and blue, so that will be on the orange side, and the yellow and blue, so right here is E, F, G, H, and then the green of the red and yellow, that goes green and red and yellow, so right here, and that's I, J, K. So now I have a H and K, and for that I use like hiking, like going for a hike up a mountain. So maybe I could have the bed that was wooden was going for a hike. And then here is white and then blue and red. And so that goes up on the top face because white, and then blue and red. So in between right here, which is a B. And that is actually the place that we cycle broke to. But since it was the second cycle, we do memorize the letter for the last piece in the cycle, which is a B. And there's actually one corner that we didn't reach yet, and that's this corner here because it's twisted. So I'm gonna cycle break to here, which is A, B, C. And so then that means I have B and C, which maybe I could memorize using a biscuit. So far we have a BD bed was made from OU wood, was going for a HK hike to the BC biscuit. And then here in the corner twist, since we broke to C, that is the red of the sticker, so it goes to here, the red side, which is M. And since that second letter, the M, goes back to the piece that we cycle broke to, then that ends it right there. So we just have a single M at the end. And so if we double it up, and so now we have MM and try and make a word out of that, maybe we could use a mummy. So our memorization for corners could be a bed that was made of wood was going on a hike to get a biscuit from the mummy, which is pretty memorable. And then we can go on to tracing the edges, and our buffer for edges is right here. And so we can look at what piece is there to start off with, and it's yellow and blue. And so that goes down to yellow and blue, so right here. And that is U, V, W. And then the piece that's there goes to white and red. Oh, it goes back to our buffer, which means that ends the first cycle, and we don't memorize the letter for our buffer, but we instead do a cycle break to another piece that we haven't solved yet. So I'm going to cycle break to here, which is A. So we have WA, which I use a Mario character called Waluigi, so I could remember Waluigi. And then that has the green and orange, so that goes to here because green and orange, and that is IJKL. So I have an L, and then the piece that's there is green and red, so that goes to here because green and red. So I'll have LJ. So maybe I could have a ledge. So it would be W-A, Waluigi was sitting on a L-J, ledge. And then the piece that's there is blue and red, which goes to back here, blue and red. So right here is Q-R-S-T. So I'd have the letter T, and then the piece that's there is orange and yellow, and so that goes to here because orange and yellow, which is E-F-G. So I would have T-G. So maybe I could have playing tag. So I could have Waluigi for W-A was sitting on a ledge, L-J, while playing T-G, tag. Gotcha. And then continuing on, the piece that's there is red and then yellow. So that would go to red and yellow. So that'd be M-N-O. And the piece that's there is white and orange, which is right here, white and orange. So that is A-B-C-D. So I have O-D. And a word that I could use for that might be odd. And that actually fits in with the story quite well because we have W-A, Waluigi was sitting on a ledge while playing tag, gotcha, which is a sort of running game where you're meant to be running away. So that is quite odd, which is our O-D. So it actually fits quite nicely there. And then what's at D, we have blue and white, and that goes to blue and white. So right here is Q. And since that's the piece that we did our cycle break to, then that ends the cycle. But since it was the second cycle, we do memorize the letter for it. So we do memorize Q. And there's one piece that we didn't reach through all of that tracing, and that was right here, this flipped edge. And so what we can do for that is we need to cycle break into it by picking one of these sides of the edge. So I'm going to say we break into this side, which is I. So I have QI, which maybe if I knew someone named Quincy, then I could use a Quincy. And that would make the story Waluigi was sitting on a ledge while playing tag, gotcha, which was a bit odd for Quincy. Maybe like Quincy was thinking it was a bit odd. And then since we cycle broke to here at I, then we need to look at where that needs to go. So white and green, so it needs to go up to the top here, which is A, B, C. So now we have a C, and since the second letter there, the C, went to the same piece that we cycle broke to just before when we cycle broke to the I, then we just leave it at that. So we have a C standalone at the end. And so in order to turn it into a word and make it more memorable, we can double it up. So we could have CC, which maybe we could do corn chips. And so that would make the memorization Waluigi was sitting on a ledge during tag, gotcha, which was a bit O-D, odd, to Q-I, to Quincy. And then we have C at the end, and we double it up to make it corn chips. So maybe Quincy was also eating corn chips. So it's pretty cool that we were able to turn that full scrambled cube into a story. And so now I think you're ready to use everything you've learned to give it a try doing the whole memorization part of a solve. Remember the lettering scheme you learnt in step 1, how you traced through the edges and corners in steps 2 and 3, learnt how to cycle break when needed in steps 4 and 5, and now you know how to pair up and turn those letters into words of a story that you can memorize from step 6. So you can do it. I'll give you 3 scrambles to try and completely memorize, so good luck. Beware, the last one is a little bit of a challenge, but I'm sure you can get it if you just apply what you've learnt. Now again, because you could have chosen to cycle break to different locations than me, your memorization could look a little bit different to the one I show. So drop the letters you memorized down in the comments and I'll try and get back to you as soon as I can to tell you if it is a correct solution. Bonus points for also commenting the words of your memorization too. That could be fun. And with that, good luck.